Have you ever walked into a room, smiled with genuine warmth, and been met with an icy glare from someone you've never wronged? You try to be kind, respectful, even invisible at times, yet there's always that one person who responds with a cold shoulder, a suspicious eye, or quiet disdain. And you start to wonder, what did I do? But maybe the answer isn't about what you did. Maybe it's about what you represent. You see, human connection is rarely straightforward. Beneath every glance, every silence, every polite exchange, there's an invisible current, a subtle tension. Because some people don't hate you for being cruel. They hate you for being a mirror, reflecting the very things they don't want to face in themselves. Sometimes it's not your actions, but your presence alone that disturbs the waters of their insecurity. Other times, a single word, a misunderstood tone, or even your quiet success can stir feelings that have nothing to do with you. Feelings that slowly curdle into resentment without a sound. The hardest truth? Not all negativity in your life is logical. In fact, some of it isn't even personal. It's psychological, it's quiet, and it's deeply human. That's why today we'll uncover 9 hidden reasons why people might secretly dislike you, and what these reasons reveal about them, not you. You'll learn how envy, misunderstanding, unspoken rivalry, and wounded egos quietly shape the way others see you. And guided by timeless Stoic wisdom, you'll discover how to navigate these emotional undercurrents with calm, clarity, and quiet strength. Because once you understand why someone resents you, you'll no longer carry their hatred as your burden. You'll begin to see it for what it is, a reflection of their own internal battles. So join me on this journey, not just through the shadows of human emotion, but toward the light of self-awareness, detachment, and inner resilience. And it all begins with one of the most corrosive emotions of all. Not rage, not hatred, but envy, quiet, sharp, and dangerously misunderstood. Envy is quiet. It doesn't shout. It doesn't confront. It smiles at you, and then prays for your fall. Among all the invisible forces that fracture human connection, envy is perhaps the most insidious. It hides behind polite compliments and hollow congratulations. It claps when you win, but in the silence that follows, it seethes. Have you ever shared good news, an achievement, a moment of joy, only to feel the room change? Someone's eyes shift, their tone tightens, the warmth disappears. You didn't brag, you didn't gloat, but somehow your light triggered their shadows. That's the nature of envy. It doesn't rise because you did something wrong. It rises because you did something right, something they wish they could have done. And in that moment, your success becomes a mirror they can't bear to look into. For some, your progress reminds them of their stagnation. Your confidence exposes their insecurity. Your joy confronts their quiet misery. They see in you the life they wanted, but didn't dare pursue. And instead of being inspired, they feel insulted. Instead of admiration, they feel hate. But here's the truth. Their resentment has little to do with you. Envy is a wound that belongs to the one who feels it. It's born from comparison, nourished by self-judgment, and weaponized when left unchecked. The Stoics understood this well. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Don't waste time worrying about what others think of you, especially when they can't even manage their own thoughts." You see, the Stoics never taught us to seek validation. They taught us to focus only on what we can control, our own thoughts, actions, and responses. If someone envies you, that emotion exists within their circle, not yours. It's not your job to dim your light just because it makes someone else squint. Still, envy isn't harmless. It poisons silently. It corrodes trust. And in time, it can lead people to act in destructive ways. They may spread rumors about you, undermine your work, laugh at your mistakes, sabotage your reputation, all in the name of soothing a wound they refuse to heal. And the cruel irony? They think tearing you down will make them feel whole, but it never does. This is why envy is so dangerous. It masquerades as harmless jealousy, but it slowly turns admiration into resentment, and resentment into hostility. It's not just an emotion, it's a fire, and left unaddressed, it burns everything in its path. So what should you do? You protect your peace. You let them burn quietly in their own illusions, while you stay grounded in your values. You walk forward, not out of arrogance, but out of discipline. Because as a Stoic, you understand. You cannot heal someone else's envy. You can only refuse to carry it. And when you feel envy trying to sneak into your own heart, because let's be honest, no one is immune, you pause, you breathe, and you remind yourself someone else's success does not take anything away from yours. The sun shines on every mountain, not just one. So if you've been the target of quiet envy, don't shrink, don't explain, don't internalize their bitterness as guilt. Just remember, their hatred says nothing about your worth, but it says everything about their pain. Let them carry it. You carry your peace. Next, how tiny miscommunications quietly destroy connection and make others turn against you without ever knowing why. Sometimes it doesn't take a betrayal or a lie or even a disagreement. Sometimes all it takes to lose someone's respect is a single misunderstood word. One look, one pause, one message that didn't land the way you meant it to. And just like that, the story in their mind begins writing itself without your permission. Misunderstandings are one of the most underestimated forces in human relationships. They rarely explode like a bomb. Instead, they drip quietly, like water eroding stone. One misread glance here, a misinterpreted silence there, until eventually the space between two people is no longer filled with trust, but with invisible tension and growing assumptions. And the worst part? You often don't realize it's happening until it's too late. You think you were being respectful by keeping your words measured. They think you were being cold. You thought your comment was honest. They heard it as judgment. You meant well, but they walked away hurt. Why? Because intention lives inside you, but interpretation lives inside them, and the distance between those two can be miles wide. Most people assume that communication is about words, but real communication is about alignment between what you say, how you say it, and how it lands in the heart of the listener. When even one of those goes missing, confusion takes its place. Then suspicion, then resentment, a sigh, a pause, a message left on read. You didn't mean harm, but the other person felt harmed. And in the absence of clarity, the mind does what it always does. It fills in the blanks with fear. You see, the human brain hates ambiguity. When we don't understand something, we create meaning from our own emotional biases. And if someone already feels insecure or unsure in the relationship, even a small misstep can confirm a fear they've secretly been holding. It wasn't your tone, it was their trauma. It wasn't your silence, it was their story. The Stoics understood this well. They believed that human suffering doesn't come from events themselves, but from the interpretations we assign to them. Epictetus said, Men are disturbed not by things, but by the view they take of them. And so, what do we do with this knowledge? We become more conscious, more precise, not just with our words, but with our presence. We learn to pause and clarify. We learn to ask instead of assume. We practice the courage to say, "Did you take that the wrong way? Because that wasn't what I meant." It seems small, but it can prevent wounds from festering in silence. Equally important, we learn to listen, not just to respond, but to understand. True listening isn't waiting for your turn to speak. It's leaning in with the intent to feel what the other person is trying to say, even if they're saying it poorly. When we fail to listen fully, we make snap judgments. We create mental caricatures of people, flawed, oversimplified versions that barely resemble the truth. And those caricatures become walls that block connection, compassion, and growth. It's not just a failure of words, it's a failure of recognition. This is why misunderstandings, if left unchecked, become breeding grounds for unnecessary conflict. Resentment begins to harden, trust withers, and eventually even a once close bond can feel distant, strained, unfamiliar. But if we catch it early, if we remain humble and curious, we can repair more than we destroy. So next time something feels off between you and someone else, ask yourself, is this real, or am I reacting to a story I told myself? And if you're brave enough, ask them the same, because in the end, almost every grudge, every unspoken hurt, every relationship that fell apart without warning can be traced back to this. One thing was said, but something else was heard. Who you are. Let's go deeper. Sometimes it's not the words we speak that divide us. It's the principles we live by. And we don't always see it coming until it's too late. Have you ever felt tension with someone, but couldn't quite explain why? There was no conflict, no harsh exchange, and yet you sensed a quiet wall between you, a distance, an emotional resistance you couldn't put into words. That wall often has a name: value mismatch. We all carry within us a code, a set of values, beliefs, and assumptions shaped by our upbringing, our culture, our pain, and our triumphs. This inner compass guides how we act, speak, love, and make decisions. And for most of us, it feels so natural, so self-evident, that we forget it's not universal. Until we collide with someone whose compass points in a different direction. It can be subtle. You believe in radical honesty. They believe in protecting feelings. You value discipline. They prize freedom. You find peace in simplicity. They thrive on excess. Neither of you is wrong, but the friction is real. The more deeply rooted a person's values are, the more personally they take any perceived challenge to them. When someone disagrees, not just with your opinion, but with the foundation of your worldview, it doesn't feel like a conversation anymore. It feels like a threat. And in that threat, the seed of resentment begins to grow. People begin to project. If you live differently than I do, then you must think I'm wrong. If you don't raise your children the way I do, then you must think I'm a bad parent. If you choose solitude while I crave attention, maybe you're silently judging me. And just like that, difference turns to defensiveness, and defensiveness turns to disdain. In the ancient world, the Stoics saw this dynamic unfolding long before social media magnified it. Epictetus reminded us, each of us is a product of our own training. That is, our beliefs are not absolute. They're shaped by experience, conditioned by culture, colored by context. So when we forget that and start thinking our values are the right ones, we unknowingly become hostile toward anyone who sees the world differently. That hostility can be cold and quiet, a friend who pulls away without explanation, a colleague who stops collaborating, a family member who smiles less, talks less, trusts less. Not because you harm them, but because your choices reminded them how different you are. And that difference felt like a rejection. Even tiny disagreements can flare up into full emotional storms when values are on the line. Think about it. You arrive 5 minutes late to a meeting. No big deal, right? But to someone who holds punctuality as a sacred virtue, that act feels disrespectful. Or you say, "I'd rather travel than settle down." To someone who's built their identity around stability, that sounds like you're devaluing their entire life. This is the subtle battlefield of belief, where no punches are thrown, but plenty of wounds are made. And when understanding is absent, bias steps in. We stop seeing people. We start seeing caricatures. They're too rigid, too emotional, too careless, too intense. But here's the hard truth. The resentment they feel for you is often just fear in disguise. Fear that their way of life is being challenged. Fear that they'll be judged. Fear that maybe, just maybe, they haven't chosen the best path after all. When someone resents your values, it rarely means you're doing anything wrong. It means your life contradicts a story they've built to feel safe. And contradictions feel threatening. So how do we respond? With tolerance, with composure, with perspective. The Stoics believed in radical acceptance of reality, including the reality that people think, act, and prioritize differently. Marcus Aurelius said, "You always own the option of having no opinion." That is, just because someone lives differently than you doesn't mean you need to react, or correct, or convince. You can choose peace over friction, understanding over judgment. This doesn't mean you betray your values. It means you embody them so completely, so calmly, that disagreement doesn't disturb your soul. Because when you stand firm in your truth and still honor others in theirs, you create the only environment where real connection can thrive. And if they still choose to distance themselves from you, let them. It's not your duty to make others comfortable with who you are. Your only duty is to live with integrity and let go of the rest. But sometimes the distance people create isn't rooted in philosophy. It's rooted in poison, whispers behind your back, false impressions, stories told in rooms you never entered. Next, we'll look at the quiet war that gossip wages and how it can destroy your reputation before you ever get the chance to speak. Sometimes people don't turn against you because of who you are. They turn against you because of a story they heard, a story you never told, a version of you you've never even met. There's something deeply unsettling about that, when your image, your name, your reputation gets passed around in whispered fragments, one sentence at a time, one distorted retelling after another, until eventually the person others see is nothing like the person you actually are. Gossip is one of the most corrosive forces in human relationships, and its power lies not in truth, but in ambiguity, in tone, in suggestion, in sentences that start with, "I heard," or "don't tell anyone," but it slips through circles like smoke. And before long, you're being judged, not by your actions, but by someone else's interpretation of your actions. And the damage? It happens quietly. A friend grows cold. A colleague stops returning messages. Invitations disappear. But no one tells you why. Because when gossip poisons the well, people stop drinking the water, even when it was once sweet. The Stoics warned us about this. They believed that reputation while not entirely unimportant, should never dictate our peace. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." In other words, the shame you feel when others talk behind your back, it's not caused by the gossip. It's caused by your attachment to how others perceive you. But let's be honest, it still hurts, especially when the stories are false, or worse, half true. That's the sinister genius of gossip. It doesn't need to invent lies. It only needs to twist reality, just enough to sound plausible. She acts like she's better than everyone else. He got that promotion because of connections. They're not as perfect as they seem. It's not outrageous. It's not obviously false. It's believable because it taps into people's existing insecurities, jealousies, and assumptions. And the moment someone wants it to be true, it becomes true enough. Gossip thrives not because people are cruel, but because they're hungry. Hungry for something to talk about, to judge, to share, especially when it makes them feel a little more righteous, a little more superior, a little more entertained. And when your name becomes the headline of their private drama, you lose something sacred, control over your own narrative. So what can you do? You resist the urge to fight fire with fire. You don't chase down every rumor, correct every misunderstanding, or beg to be seen accurately. Why? Because those who believe gossip without ever speaking to you directly were never truly with you to begin with. Your job is not to convince the misled. Your job is to remain anchored in your truth. The Stoics would tell you this: live in such a way that if a rumor spreads about you, those who know you won't believe it. That doesn't mean staying silent when damage is done. Sometimes dignity includes drawing boundaries, correcting falsehoods, or walking away from toxic environments. But it also means understanding this. Your reputation is a shadow. Your character is the source. Let your actions speak louder than the whispers. Let your consistency drown out the noise. Because eventually the truth has a rhythm. It shows up over time, in your patience, your resilience, your refusal to stoop to petty retaliation. And the ones who matter, they'll see it, they'll feel it, and the noise will fade. Still, it's hard, watching your image be twisted, your name passed around like gossip currency. But every time you choose composure over chaos, truth over vengeance, you reclaim your power. Because nothing disrupts a rumor mill more than silence paired with unwavering integrity. When someone hasn't healed their own wounds, they start to project them onto you. Next, we'll uncover how deep insecurities silently turn admiration into resentment, and why some people only see your light as a threat to their darkness. Not all hostility comes from something you've said or done. Sometimes it comes simply because you remind someone of who they're not. There's a quiet truth about human nature that most people overlook. Before someone hates you, they often envy you. But before they envy you, they see something in you that reflects a part of themselves they've been trying to avoid. It could be your calm, your success, your authenticity, your peace, but whatever it is, it stirs something inside them, a discomfort, a shame, a wound they haven't dealt with. And rather than look inward and ask, "Why does this bother me?" they look outward and ask, "Who does she think she is?" This is the essence of projection. Projection happens when a person, unable or unwilling to face their own insecurities, begins to assign those feelings onto others. Instead of confronting their self-doubt, they blame you for making them feel small. Instead of facing their fear of inadequacy, they accuse you of being arrogant. Instead of acknowledging their own failures, they call you lucky. In truth, you didn't cause their discomfort. You simply exposed it. As Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And the imagined threat of someone else's confidence, growth, or peace can feel, to the insecure, as if it were a personal attack. And so, they go on the attack, not with fists, but with assumptions, with snide remarks, with subtle distance, with the kind of resentment that simmers beneath surface-level civility. To the outside world, nothing seems wrong, but inside their mind, you've become a symbol, a reminder of everything they lack. It's not because you flaunted your success, it's because you were visible. And visibility to an insecure person feels like confrontation. Let's say someone is deeply insecure about their career. Maybe they've been passed over, overlooked, or silently regret the path they took. And then, you walk into the room, confident, focused, thriving. They may smile at you, but deep down, your presence amplifies their self-doubt. So to protect their fragile ego, their mind rewrites the story. He must be manipulative. She's probably fake. They think they're better than everyone. In that moment, their resentment becomes a defense mechanism. They're not really angry at you. They're angry at what you trigger in them. The Stoics understood this human tendency well. Epictetus taught that people are not disturbed by events, but by their interpretations of them. Your confidence isn't offensive. Their lens is what distorts it. And once you understand that, you stop internalizing their hate. You begin to see that their judgment isn't about you. It's about their battle with themselves. And suddenly the burden lifts. You stop over-explaining. You stop shrinking. You stop making yourself small so others feel more comfortable. Instead, you let your life speak for itself. But here's something else to consider. You too are capable of projection. We all are. That's why this awareness isn't just protection from others. It's a mirror for ourselves. Anytime you feel triggered by someone else's success, pause and ask, is this truly about them, or is this showing me something about me? That's the path of self-mastery, because when we stop blaming others for our discomfort and start confronting the roots of it, we begin to grow. We start to admire instead of envy, to celebrate instead of compare, to connect instead of compete. So what can you do when someone projects their insecurity onto you? First, don't absorb it. Second, don't retaliate. And third, don't personalize their pain. You are not the villain in their story. You're just a character their fear wrote in. Stay kind, but stay grounded. Hold space for their struggle if it feels safe to do so. But never shrink to protect someone's fragile pride. That is not compassion. That is self-betrayal, because someone else's storm should never drown out your light. And if you must walk away from their projections, do so without anger. Do so with understanding, because their reaction, no matter how loud, is never as revealing as your ability to stay silent and steady. Let them judge. Let them project. Let them wrestle with shadows that are theirs to face. You stay free. But what if the real problem isn't envy or projection? What if it's something even more fundamental? Something missing. Not hatred, not jealousy, but empathy. The one thing that, when absent, makes even the smallest misunderstanding feel like betrayal. Next, we uncover how the lack of empathy can quietly dismantle relationships, and how Stoic clarity can help you navigate the coldness of indifference. Imagine walking through life wearing your heart on your sleeve, carrying invisible battles, trying your best, but the people around you don't seem to notice. They misunderstand you, misinterpret your intentions, make judgments without context, and worse, some don't even care to ask. There's a coldness in that kind of disregard, not because they hate you, but because they never truly saw you. This is what happens in a world starved of empathy. We often think resentment comes from dramatic betrayal or open conflict, but more often than not, it grows in the quiet spaces between two people who fail to truly understand one another, where assumptions replace conversations, where judgment takes the place of curiosity. It's not the sharp words that cut deepest. It's the moments when someone clearly didn't even try to understand you. Empathy is what keeps relationships from collapsing under the weight of imperfection. It's the thread that weaves together our differences and allows us to coexist, even when we don't agree. Without it, every flaw is amplified. Every word is weaponized. Every silence feels like abandonment. And when empathy is missing, something subtle, but deeply painful, begins to happen. You stop feeling safe, you stop feeling seen, and eventually, you stop showing up as yourself. The Stoics knew the dangers of shallow perception. They understood that the human tendency to judge without understanding is not just unwise, but deeply destructive. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Whenever you are about to find fault with someone, ask yourself, what fault of mine most resembles this one?" In other words, compassion begins with introspection. But that's the problem, isn't it? Many people don't look inward. They're too absorbed in their own narratives, their own pain, their own self-importance. So when they see you, they don't see you. They see only a reflection of their beliefs, their expectations, or their discomfort. And because empathy takes effort, emotional energy, patience, humility, some choose the shortcut, assumption. They don't ask what you meant. They decide. They don't consider what you're going through. They judge. And suddenly you're left navigating a relationship built not on reality, but on false impressions and premature conclusions. What makes this worse is how subtle it all feels. The person may not lash out or speak cruelly, but you feel the distance, the lack of warmth, the quiet dismissiveness that says, "I don't need to understand you. I've already made up my mind." And that in its own way can hurt more than open hostility, because at least with hate, you know where you stand. With apathy, you're left floating, unseen, unheard, and emotionally exiled. But don't be fooled. Their lack of empathy says far more about their emotional limitations than your worth. People who haven't cultivated emotional maturity often lack the depth to understand others. Narcissism, self-absorption, chronic insecurity, these traits blind people to the experiences outside of their own. They live in a mirror maze, only reacting to what reflects them. And when you speak, they don't listen, they evaluate. So how do you survive in a world like that? You begin by letting go of the need to be understood by everyone. You realize that not all hearts are built to hold yours. Some people can't meet you where you are because they've never met themselves honestly. The Stoics would advise you to withdraw emotionally, but not unkindly. Not every battle needs to be fought. Not every misunderstanding must be cleared up. Not every cold soul deserves your warmth. Instead, you become intentional. You conserve your energy. You surround yourself with those who do listen, do ask, do seek to understand. And for those who don't, you give them silence, not as punishment, but as peace, because you refuse to play tug-of-war with someone who's not even holding the rope. You recognize that their inability to empathize isn't your responsibility to fix. It's your signal to protect your peace. And if you ever catch yourself judging too quickly, if you find impatience bubbling up, remind yourself, we all have blind spots. The difference is, those who live with Stoic awareness seek them out. They don't let ego blind them. They ask, they listen, they pause. Because empathy isn't weakness, it's precision, it's strength with softness. And the more you practice it, the easier it becomes to navigate a world where so many are still learning how to see beyond themselves. Too much comparison. When admiration turns into obsession, and one person starts measuring their worth only in relation to yours? Next, we uncover how competition and rivalry quietly twist connection into resentment, and what the Stoics taught us about the true nature of success. There's a certain look some people give you when you succeed. It's not quite envy. It's not quite admiration either. It's a kind of tension, like they're watching a scoreboard, one you never agreed to play on. You didn't mean to compete. You were just doing your best. But somewhere along the way, someone started treating your progress like their personal loss. And suddenly the energy shifts. Your wins don't feel welcome. Your presence becomes a threat, and everything becomes a quiet contest. This is the quiet war of unspoken rivalry. Competition, in its healthiest form, can be motivating. It challenges us to rise, sharpen our skills, push beyond our comfort zones. But left unchecked, especially when rooted in insecurity, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes resentment disguised as ambition, bitterness masked as drive, a burning need not just to win, but to see you lose. The Stoics warned about this. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury," meaning when others turn competition into hostility, you don't have to follow them into the arena. You don't need to make life a battlefield. Still, when someone sees you as a rival, especially when you never asked for that role, it's hard to ignore. Their words grow sharper. Their support fades. Their kindness becomes conditional. And their eyes start scanning your life for flaws, cracks, any reason to believe you don't deserve what you have. Because your existence challenges their self-image. Your growth feels like proof of their stagnation. And every time you rise, they hear a silent accusation. Why not me? This happens everywhere, in the workplace, in friend groups, even within families. Sometimes it's obvious, backhanded compliments, passive-aggressive comments, calculated silence when good things happen to you. Other times it's more subtle, exclusion, subtle sabotage, quiet distancing. They may not attack you openly, but you'll feel it in the undercurrent of how they treat you. And if you're not careful, you'll start shrinking to make them feel bigger. You'll second-guess your joy. You'll dull your shine to avoid triggering their discomfort. But the Stoic path says otherwise. It says, let them compete. Let them chase illusions. You stay anchored. Because your worth isn't a rank, your progress isn't a threat, and your path isn't a racetrack, it's a journey. If someone turns everything into a competition, they reveal more about their insecurity than about your success. The comparison isn't really about you, it's about what they fear they lack. And sometimes it's personal. Maybe they feel you've stolen attention they believe should have been theirs. Maybe they think life gave you the rewards they were promised. Maybe they believe there's only room for one person at the top. But here's the truth. There's no limited supply of success, no ceiling on growth. The sun shines on many flowers, not just one. When we operate from abundance, we celebrate others without feeling threatened. But when someone operates from scarcity, your rise feels like their fall. So what can you do? You continue. Not out of spite, but out of focus. You stop managing other people's discomfort. You stop apologizing for the work you've done. You stop explaining why you deserve your joy. You stop playing a game you never agreed to. And if someone turns cold, tries to discredit you, even tries to sabotage your steps forward, you stay grounded. You protect your peace. You hold your boundary. Because you are not responsible for someone else's scoreboard. You are responsible only for your integrity. The Stoics knew the truth. External achievements mean nothing if they compromise internal harmony. The real victory is not outshining someone else. It's remaining undisturbed when others try to pull you into their emotional chaos. So let them compete with illusions. You compete only with yesterday's version of yourself. Because your journey is not a performance, it's a practice. Expectation. Next, we explore how society's silent rules pressure people to reject anything that doesn't fit the mold, and how your authenticity becomes a quiet rebellion against the status quo. Sometimes people don't hate you for being wrong. They hate you for being different. They don't resent you because you hurt them. They resent you because you didn't conform. You didn't follow the script. You didn't live by the rules they silently accepted, and your very existence became uncomfortable. This is the quiet pressure of social expectation. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't demand, it assumes. Assumes you'll fit in, assumes you'll follow the timeline, assumes you'll want what everyone else wants. Get the degree, get the job, get married, have kids. Smile politely. Don't question too much. Don't dream too loud. And above all, don't be different. But what happens when you are? What happens when you choose a path less traveled? When you say no to tradition? When you prioritize fulfillment over approval? For many, your choice becomes a threat, not because it harms them, but because it challenges the foundations of their identity. They see your freedom, and it makes them question their own obedience. They see your courage, and it reflects their compromise. They see your path, and it disrupts the comfort of the one they were told to follow. And instead of asking, "Why does this challenge me?" they get angry, not at the system, not at the culture, at you, because you became the mirror. And not everyone is ready to look into it. You see, most people don't hate deviation because it's dangerous. They hate it because it's unfamiliar. And humans fear the unfamiliar far more than they fear being unfulfilled. So when you live your truth, when you pursue art instead of accounting, when you choose solitude over marriage, when you walk away from a legacy to build your own story, you'll inevitably meet resistance. It may come as judgment. That's irresponsible. That's selfish. You'll regret this. It may come as subtle exclusion, the invitations that stop coming, the silence when you speak, the conversations that move on without you. It may even come from those closest to you, family, childhood friends, mentors. Not because they hate you, but because your path is rewriting the story they told themselves was the only way. The Stoics, again, saw through this illusion centuries ago. Epictetus taught that we should never be governed by the expectations of the crowd, that true freedom comes not from rebellion, but from inner clarity, from living in alignment with your values, regardless of external approval. You see, society is a system built on rhythm and repetition. Anything outside of that rhythm feels like disruption. And you are the unexpected note in the melody. But that doesn't mean you're off key. It means you're composing your own music. So how do you survive in a world that labels nonconformity as threat? First, you recognize the source of the discomfort. It's not really about you. It's about what you represent. You are the unwritten rule breaker, the walking reminder that there's another way, a way they may have never had the courage to explore. And that reminder is confronting. Second, you hold fast to your principles, not with arrogance, but with humility. You don't need to shout your choices. You don't need to convert anyone to your philosophy. You simply live it with quiet consistency. Because as the Stoics taught, let your actions speak. Let your life become the argument. And third, you let go. You release the need to be understood by those who are still shackled to approval. You forgive them for their discomfort, and you walk your path without dragging their judgments along with you. Because authenticity is not just about expression, it's about endurance. Enduring the side eyes, the questions, the loneliness, the doubt, and still saying, this is who I am, this is my path, and I will walk it fully. Not to provoke, not to rebel, but to be free, invisible. Next, we explore how the lack of recognition, of appreciation, of being seen, can quietly transform respect into bitterness, and how Stoic awareness can protect you from the weight of others' unmet expectations. Few things cut deeper than being unseen. You show up, you give, you support others, you work late, you stay quiet when it would be easier to speak, you offer help without being asked, you sacrifice, you care. And still, no one says thank you, no one claps, no one even notices, until eventually, something inside begins to harden. This is how resentment is born, not through betrayal or insult, but through neglect, through the quiet ache of feeling like your presence doesn't matter. At first, it feels like sadness, then fatigue, then bitterness, and finally it calcifies into a silent vow. Why should I keep trying? Recognition is a basic human need, not out of vanity, but out of belonging. We all want to feel that our efforts, our intentions, our existence are acknowledged, that we count for something. And when that need goes unmet, especially over time, it creates a wound that doesn't scream, but whispers, "You're not valued." This is especially painful in environments where competition is high, workplaces, families, communities, where one person's recognition often feels like another's invisibility. You watch someone else get praised for the very thing you've been doing in silence for months. You see your contributions brushed aside while someone else gets the spotlight. You give everything and receive almost nothing in return, and the mind begins to twist. Maybe they're ignoring me on purpose. Maybe I'm not enough. Maybe I don't matter. But the Stoics would tell you, pause, because recognition, like reputation, belongs to the world of externals. And Epictetus warned us long ago not to anchor our self-worth in things we can't control. It doesn't mean you shouldn't care. It means you shouldn't depend on it. Because if your identity is tied to someone else's applause, you'll live your life in emotional debt to people who may never repay it. Instead, the Stoic path invites us inward. Ask not, do they see me? Ask, did I show up with integrity? Ask not, did they appreciate me? Ask, did I act from principle or from performance? Because what you do in the dark, when no one's watching, is the truest reflection of who you are. Still, this doesn't erase the sting of being overlooked. It doesn't cancel out the pain of trying so hard and still feeling invisible. So what do you do with that pain? You acknowledge it. You don't suppress it, but you also don't let it rot your character. Because the danger of being unrecognized is becoming unrecognizable to yourself. When bitterness sets in, we begin to sabotage the very qualities that once made us strong. We withdraw, we gossip, we underperform. We stop showing up fully because we're tired of being the only ones who show up at all. And slowly we become the version of ourselves we once vowed never to be. But you don't have to let that happen. Instead, you draw a boundary, not to punish others, but to preserve your peace. You decide where your energy goes, who receives your attention, what earns your effort. You keep showing up, not for recognition, but because that's who you are. You do good work, not to be praised, but because excellence is your standard. You speak kindly, not to be loved, but because kindness is your default. You don't need a round of applause to validate your worth. As Marcus Aurelius said, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." Let that sink in. You are not invisible. You are just misread by people whose eyes are clouded by their own expectations. You are not underwhelming. You are just unrecognized by those who only celebrate what reflects them. So take your recognition back from their silence, from their forgetfulness, from their selective memory, and give it to yourself. You were never here to be their favorite. You were here to be true. Now you understand. It was never just about you. It was about them and the inner war they've been fighting alone. Up next, the final message, a closing reflection from Stoic wisdom on how to protect your peace and walk forward with clarity, resilience, and strength no matter who misunderstands you. So now you know, the reasons someone might secretly resent you have little to do with your flaws and everything to do with their fears. Sometimes it's envy, sometimes it's a misunderstanding. Other times it's rivalry, projection, pride, or pain they haven't named yet. But almost always, it's about them, their inner war, their invisible wounds, their fragile expectations of how you should be, and the discomfort they feel when you don't meet them. And that's the secret truth. People rarely hate you. They hate the story they've created about you. They react not to your reality, but to their perception of your presence. But here's where your power lies. You don't have to absorb it. You don't have to carry their pain like it belongs to you. You don't have to contort yourself into something more digestible, more familiar, more acceptable, just to avoid triggering their insecurity. Because as a Stoic, you know this: what is not within your control is not your concern. You cannot control how others think of you. You cannot control the insecurities they project, the narratives they invent, or the standards they set without ever consulting you. But you can control how you respond. You can choose dignity over defense, clarity over chaos, stillness over performance. You can walk into every room knowing, I am not here to be understood by everyone. I am here to be at peace with myself. That's the gift of Stoicism. It doesn't teach you to fight the world. It teaches you to stand unmoved when the world tries to fight you. It teaches you not to demand fairness, but to be just. Not to chase love, but to embody it. Not to silence the crowd, but to calm your inner voice. So when people resent you, let them. When they whisper, let them. When they twist your name into something unrecognizable, let your character correct the story, because your power was never in convincing them. It was in remaining you, no matter what they think. Some people will leave. Some will misunderstand. Some will grow bitter as you grow brighter. Let it happen. Don't interrupt their journey of learning. Don't slow down to make your path more comfortable for those who never plan to walk beside you. Just keep moving, with grace, with strength, with focus. Because peace isn't found in the absence of judgment. It's found in the refusal to live for it. And the people meant for you, they won't resent your light. They'll rise with it. They'll reflect it. They'll recognize in you something honest, something rare, and they'll stay. Until then, stay the course. Walk your path, not perfectly, but truthfully, not loudly, but fully, not to prove, but to live. And when the storms rise, when envy, misunderstanding, or gossip swirls around you, remember, the calmest person in the room is always the most powerful. Be that person. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to pause and reflect. What part of this story mirrored your own? If you feel like sharing, leave a comment, even a single word, peacefulness, to remind yourself and this community that you've chosen peace over noise. And if you want to keep growing on this journey of clarity, confidence, and emotional strength, you'll find 2 more videos waiting here for you. This is not the end. This is where it really begins. Until next time, stay grounded, stay kind, stay true.